everybody. Welcome to another episode of COVID Convos, where we have real conversations with real people about what wellbeing looks like in a time of a pandemic. My name's Simon, and I've got my co-host tonight is Kesh. How are you, Kesh?
I'm doing really, really good, man. Hopefully I can pick up the slack for Griggsy. He's feeling a little unwell today, so thoughts go out to him, but hopefully we'll be just as entertaining without him.
Yeah, definitely, mate.
Oh, I'm not sure about that.
Yeah, me neither. I'm very, very scared today.
Well, we do rely on, or Griggsy thinks we rely on him for the humorous side. So we'll have to see how we go tonight and do a laugh count and compare it to the other episodes. But yeah, I'm sure Griggsy will be back soon on deck, and we look forward to that. And we also have with us tonight a special guest, Rachel Colla. How are you, Rachel?
Good. Thanks for having me. Excited to be joining in the conversation with you guys.
Awesome. Thanks for coming along. It's great to see you. How have you been? What's been happening in your local area lately?
How have I been? How much of a loaded question is that these days? Do you know, interestingly, one of the things I think that I am doing more is actually answering that really honestly, much more than I think I ever had. So today I'm doing really well. Today I'm feeling really good. I'm feeling really at peace and actually even hopeful about some of the things that I'm working on. And yesterday I was exhausted and shattered and so, you know, it's a different answer at even sometimes different times of the day.
Yeah, up and down. I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that.
I have a weird feeling around like temporality. It's kind of almost like you're living half a day at a time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so true. Yeah. Yeah.
Rachel, just for people out there who haven't come across you so far, there might be a couple.
It's concerning.
Surprisingly. Could you just take a minute or two just to introduce yourself and your background, interests, any of that sort of stuff?
Sure. I always giggle at this question because I never really know how to answer it. I think if there's one thing that defines me in my life is that I wear numerous hats. And so depending on the situation, you know, those different hats will come out. So maybe it might be simpler if I kind of categorize it into some kind of broad areas. Professionally, I probably would call myself a pracademic. And by that, I mean, I spend part of my life in academia. I'm a hope researcher and I teach, broadly speaking, wellbeing science at the University of Melbourne part-time. But I'm very much a practitioner, first and foremost. So I guess the rest of my time, I'm out working with schools and organisations on the application of wellbeing science and what that actually means, specific to their context and specifically to how they can kind of create a thriving community. And that's probably consistent with what I do in my personal life too. I think it's kind of this nice common theme that gets to spread throughout my life. Personally, I am a wife first and foremost and mother of 4 amazing daughters. Our daughters are 23, nearly 24, down to nearly 15. So that's a really interesting experience navigating that with all of our girls at the moment. And I do a lot of volunteer work, netball coaching, on a board of a school, lots of work out in other different communities as well. So that's kind of me in a nutshell.
Certainly sounds like you've got a full plate, that's for sure. You touched on hope a couple of times, and that you've been formally studying hope pretty deeply and at a high level. Just interested, are you able to just explain that construct a bit more and sort of, what constitutes hope and why it's important and what we get out of it?
Yeah.
Especially in this sort of time, I suppose.
Absolutely. You know, it's really interesting. When I started studying hope, I did so because I thought it was a really like a pivotal underpinning piece to well-being. And I tell you what, if anything, this situation has like highlighted that enormously, how valuable developing a sense of hope can actually be. So I guess that traditionally within our scientific knowledge of hope, we kind of see it to be 2 key components, and really intentionally it's about goal direction. So it's that understanding that all of us by nature are goal directed, and those goals can be as simple as, you know, I want to achieve X in my career, or I want to make sure I'm looking after my health, or I need to make sure that I get the bills paid at the end of this month. So we, by nature, as human beings, we are very goal directed. And what the literature around hope tells us is that when we have kind of two components to that, or two different ways of thinking, it creates a really strong sense of energy that allows us to be able to cope and problem solve in a really effective way. And those two components are a sense of what we call agency thinking or willpower. So I've got the capacity to believe that I can move towards my goals and I can push through obstacles and keep, that belief that it is achievable. I might not know how to get there yet, but I have a belief in my capacity to be able to do that. And then the second part is what we call way power or pathways thinking. And this is the part that I think is really, really fascinating right now, is our capacity to be able to connect back to those goals and say, well, what are the different ways that I can work to move towards those goals? And specifically what I love about hope is it's not blind optimism, right? It's not, oh, let's just hope that everything's going to be okay. Hope is absolutely grounded. So that pathway thinking is really important to be able to identify what are the obstacles that are likely to get in the way for me and how am I going to navigate that? So that's kind of the short version of hope theory as it's put in the scientific literature.
Yeah, thanks, Rachel. You mentioned something, well, a few things there, but that grabbed my interest. But I suppose the first one was around that agency thinking or side of the coin, and having the belief that you can do something or get through something. And I was just wondering, in this time, like I know myself, I've never been through a pandemic before. So are there any ways I can have agency or develop that sense that I can get through this when I haven't done it before? Is it a matter of looking at sort of similar situations or other sort of strengths or resources or skills I've got that might apply? Or
Yep. Yeah, I think someone you raised two really great points, right, is most of us have not been through this before. And that doesn't mean that we can't draw upon our existing strengths, our existing capabilities to allow us to be able to navigate through that. So one of the things that I often, in terms of the strategies that we can build that willpower side, is appreciative inquiry, which some of our listeners will be familiar with. But even just the nature of inquiring into, when have I faced challenging times in the past and what tools have I been able to draw upon to be able to support myself going, being able to progress throughout that. So I absolutely think there are a number of things that we can do to be able to reflect upon and draw upon our own internal resources of ways that we've navigated through challenge, through adversity in the past. But one of the areas of my particular research interest in hope, which is looking to expand our existing models, is a limitation that I see that it's all up to us, that we each have an individual sense of agency. And I think this is absolutely shining a light on that we can't achieve everything on our own as individuals. We are so interconnected. And if we actually start thinking about what I'm calling who power, so who else might I be able to draw upon, where I can leverage, I call them like my courage crusaders, right? When I'm struggling, who else do I have in my network that I can lean on, learn from, create, ideate, etc., when I might be low myself in terms of that level of capacity. Does that help?
Yeah, definitely. No, thanks very much. It's always been something I'm interested in, the hope, and I can definitely sense how, at times through this pandemic, when I've been hopeful about, what's on the other side of it or my ability to cope, it can certainly make a big difference.
Absolutely. Well, the funny thing about hope, I often think about it as like a pre-source. So it's actually an energy system that allows us to tap into other resources, right, that can support us. And so being able to maintain that level of energy, which, as I said yesterday, I was shattered. I was absolutely depleted, exhausted, had nothing left in the tank. And I know for myself, when I get to that stage, sometimes it's actually just about sitting with that. It's actually about sitting and saying, I'm exhausted and there's really good reasons why I'm struggling right now. So let's acknowledge that. Let's not try and deny the challenge that we're going through. But if I do that and can be accepting of that, it then allows me, I guess, to be a bit more agile in terms of how I then move beyond that space.
Rach, I'm curious because you brought up this idea almost of collective hope. And I'm wondering, is there anywhere that you're seeing that being done well currently? Are there any examples that we can draw upon?
That is such a great question, Kesh. And I'd love to answer it in about 3 months' time, because I'll tell you a story about one of my schools that I'm actually working with. And we've co-designed a Hope Lab program, which is effectively looking at applying the science of how adolescents can build hope, but apply it in their own community. And one of the things that these teachers have done in their beautiful creativity is pivot. We normally do this in mapping it to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, right? Where we get students to choose projects that they're passionate about, that they can map their strengths and talents to, and design or co-design with their community ways that they can actually make a difference. And these teachers have actually flipped that and said, we're scrapping that, and we're actually creating ministry councils of how our young people can respond to the different challenges that they are seeing coming up through the corona pandemic, and look at where they can actually make a difference in their own community. So they're genuinely looking at creating or cultivating like a collective sense of hope that is turned outwards towards their community, which I literally have goosebumps when I think about what they're doing. And I can't wait to see what that actually looks like, not just in terms of the outcomes that we know will be amazing, right? But actually in terms of that generative social field, right? It's not just about an individual's ability to be able to achieve that goal, but it's that collective sense of being able to co-create that.
It's such a cool point to bring up. There's a thing that I've recently signed up to, which constantly makes me feel inadequate, which is this site, and I'll put the link in the show details, called Crowd Fight COVID.
Okay.
And basically people can sign up with whatever expertise that they have, and daily tasks get posted around the world of researchers, people that are fighting the virus in different ways. And you can, if you can help with something, or you know someone that can help with something, you can put that in. And it's creating pathways that didn't exist before to get things done, right? And even though most days I sign on and I kind of go through and I'm like, can't help with that, can't help with that, can't help with that. It feels good to know that that stuff is happening out in the world.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And
absolutely.
to be a part of it.
Yeah. Do you know, it's really interesting. One of the things that got me interested in this whole concept, right, of who power was actually looking at some of the literature that's coming out of our Eastern nations, because so much of wellbeing science, pos psych is like, you know, couched within a Western ideology, right? And so we typically think that agency or even our own pathways have got to be up to us individually. But in a collectivist ideology, that's a completely different mindset. Like it's not even just that my goals need to be for the greater good of the community, but rather I don't need to achieve that on my own. And so just that sense of being able to see how others are actually coming up with pathways can inspire our own thinking around different ways that we can do it. So Kesh, you mightn't be seeing ways immediately that you can help, but that is sparking something in you that then, you know, enlivens your creativity and your ability to be able to do that in different ways.
Yeah, 100%. Like, it's just amazing. Like, a lot of the projects are really extreme scientific things. Like, do you know how this particular machine can do X, Y, and Z? And I'm like, no, I can't. But every so often,
it's really
there's something
cool
like,
if someone can.
Yeah, but that's the thing, right? Out there, someone can. You're just like, whoa, did not know that existed until, you know, just now, where we need that, and we all need to pull together to make that happen.
That's actually one of the great gifts I think that is coming out of this, right? Is that shift away from competition and, you know, to actually contribution, and, you know, how we can actually share knowledge like we never have before. But actually it's the boundaries that have been pulled away that I think are enabling that a lot more right now.
Yeah. And, you know, again, I think like what you were saying before around that concept of creativity that comes around this pathways finding, like whole factories, whole regions being turned into like manufacturing plants for things that they're not meant to manufacture because they've had to, right?
Yep.
Like, and to know that we're capable of that now, like
Yeah.
we're learning what we can do in real time.
Yeah. And isn't it interesting, right? Because one of the, in the design of my, my Hope Labs approach, one of the fundamental pieces that I put in there for educators was, we need to look at how we create learning experiences for students where it's safe for them to fail, right? Because when they fail, that's when they're going to learn. If we can provide growth feedback, if we can provide those opportunities that it's safe for them to be able to experiment, then think about, you know, everything they're going to learn as part of that. And actually most of our education system has not typically been set up to do that. And yet at the moment, I can tell you, we have transformed our large undergraduate subject for nearly 400 students into an online modality overnight, when everyone else would normally say, you can't do that. There's not the permission to be able to trial and iterate that. But we have to now. So so it's creating the opportunity for us to be able to truly have a more AI concept of learning, right? Like where we can fail, iterate, fail, iterate, fail, iterate. And we're doing it live, which I think is super exciting. Scary, but super exciting.
Yeah, for sure. And I think this situation's almost given us a bit of permission to fail. And not have everything lined up and all the certainty and all that sort of stuff. Just like jump in and give it a try. And if it doesn't work, we'll try something else. And so that's really encouraging. But I was interested. I wanted to ask you, Rachel, about that sort of approach to failure and what's it like in the younger generations, I suppose. Like I've got a couple of kids, and I can tend to see in them growing up that that sense that failure is bad sort of almost gets taught to them. And I compare that to myself or my generation, and that's, I think pretty bred into us. But for the schools that you work with, are they more sort of embracing of failure or failing or giving things a try than what you experience in other parts of the community?
Yeah, I guess I'd probably answer that, Simon, on two levels. I would say I think there are many teachers that create an environment in their, like a learning environment that facilitates and allows students to feel comfortable with failing. And I would say many of the structures of our education system disable that or squash that. So for example, I've got a daughter in year 12. And so while we can have plenty of conversations, and she's got, amazing teachers that are like, we're experimenting with this, we're going to find our way through. The way the education system is structured is that everything is narrowed down to how she does on her final exams as a pointy end into the next step of her education. And so that sort of structure, if you like, can actually stop that willingness to fail and iterate.
I want to expand that out as well, not just education. We have a very risk-averse society. Rachel and I were playing with the concept of risk very recently, and thinking through it, because even the way that we think about risk is often associated with loss. But we take risks because there's a potential gain, and we just don't generally think in terms of gain. We always think in terms of loss, and that completely changes the equation, right? Here's an opportunity, I think, for us to rethink that paradigm, because even with COVID, for example, and natural disasters, because so much of our thinking is around do the least harm possible and try to mitigate the most risk, we usually take middle of the path approaches. But when it comes to disasters like COVID or things like Fukushima, taking a middle of the line approach isn't good enough. You really need to plan for the outliers that very, very unlikely to happen. But that's the way that, you protect for those things. But we don't have that kind of thinking, because
we don't traditionally have that kind of thinking, right? And I think this is the opportunity to be able to challenge some of that, because, and it's just started to rain. Sorry if that's distracting for anyone. I'm actually loving the sound of rain on the roof at the moment. It's quite lovely. This, you can see my little scatterbrain mind go right now that I just get, oh, look, pretty colours. I get distracted.
Oh, a butterfly.
That's right, exactly. One of the things, I was listening to a really interesting podcast this morning around the application of appreciative inquiry to be able to look at reinvention, right? And Lindsay Godwin, who is one of my academic heroes, absolutely adore her and her thinking, used the example of the smallpox pandemic and the way in which we actually moved through that, which I think is so representative of how we often move through major events, right? We're in lockdown, narrowed focus, fear, let's deal with the immediate threat. And so all of the questions that we're asking around, how do we mitigate this? How do we prevent massive spread? How do we, preserve life, for example? And those questions will direct our intention in a very important and necessary way. But as we continue to move through that, there's the opportunity to be able to ask different questions, right, that open up new possibilities. And it's one of the things that we've spoken about so often is we are not well trained in asking good questions. And it's a literacy that I think we all need to develop, right? And I know this for myself in my career as a leader. I've had to really challenge myself to learn the art of flipping the questions that I'm asking, right? Because they completely direct our attention. And I think that's one of the things that may become a potential opportunity as part of this, is looking at the different questions that we ask and what that can lead to.
I hope that wasn't a bit of feedback directed at us mid-show, Rachel, about our questions. But
yeah, could you sharpen your questions, dudes? Come on.
we'll take it on board. Just kidding. Rachel, we're getting pretty close to our time, unfortunately. But is there anything that we haven't had a chance to be able to speak about tonight that you would like to sort of put out in the world or get across to people listening?
No, actually, there's nothing that immediately jumps to mind other than, and it's not something I want to put out into the world, but I'm actually curious from you guys. I know that you've done the wonderful art of asking lots of questions and kind of generating this really great conversation. But Mike, and forgive me, this might have been something that you had actually done in a previous episode, but my curiosity is what opportunity you each see is coming out of this for yourselves personally.
Can I go first? I'll jump in. I've had the opportunity to pretty much question everything. I feel really lucky. I had just started a business. I was very fresh into it. And all of this has sort of put that on pause, but that pause has just allowed me to interrogate the very foundations. Like, not just the business idea, but like, why am I doing it? What am I doing it for? What am I trying to achieve? And it's actually given me the opportunity to actually unlearn a whole bunch of things through that line of questioning. And I think, going back to this idea of questions, one of the ones that I see having a really positive effect for a lot of people is this question of what matters most, what is essential, what is really important here. Gets asked in different ways, in different forms, but wherever it's asked, I see those people thriving. It's a really good question, Rach.
Hey Simon, before we come to you, can I respond to that really quickly, just in the spirit of dialogue?
Definitely, go for it. You're asking the questions now, so.
I know. So we're just flipping, and I've decided to turn into the interviewer instead. Kesh, I'm so glad that you said that, because that's actually the additional piece that I am proposing to add to hope theory that I think is fundamental, that we've missed, and that is one of the greatest opportunities that this pandemic is offering us. And that is a clarity of why power, right? I think that we so often run through this world sometimes with conscious goals, sometimes with unconscious goals. And that can determine, how we actually move towards that, and the level of energy and hope that we actually have. But when we come back to really questioning and being, clear on that core why, what is the meaning, what is the purpose, it allows us to be able to construct things in a really different way that create that level of energy.
Yeah, I mean, that's been my kind of experience with, you know, some of the spaces that I've been working in, they've been talking about going online, and I get it, but just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Correct.
And lots of people are running to do it.
Yeah.
But if they really sat down and asked why,
Yeah.
then maybe they wouldn't.
Yeah. We need to all embrace our inner 4-year-old and keep asking why. Sorry, Simon, I didn't mean to.
No, I'm nodding my head in agreement. For sure, it's just lacking so much, I think, normally. But yeah, I'm hopeful that maybe this sort of situation gets people asking more about what's essential and why am I doing this and why aren't I doing something else. And yeah, it definitely is a time for reflection. But I think to answer your first question, Rachel, I think the biggest thing or the best thing I've gotten out of it so far is, well, the first thing that came to mind was just actually spending more time with my kids. Fortunate enough to have the opportunity to spend good time with them anyway, but now with you know, my wife working and me at home, I'm sort of with them almost 24 hours a day and getting to see another side, learning with them and trying to help teach and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, just digging down a bit deeper and yeah, really spending some quality time and having a laugh and helping them learn and yeah, all that sort of stuff. So
Amazing.
it's I'm only 2 days into it, so ask me in another couple of days and it could be
different answers for the morning and the afternoon and the evening.
Yep.
Yeah.
Love it. That's awesome.
Thanks, Rachel.
Pleasure.
It was awesome to have you on our show. Good luck with everything you're doing, juggling all those different plates. I'm sure you'll do it well. And yeah, look forward to catching up with you again.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, guys. Really appreciate the invitation and love what you're doing. So it was great to be part of the conversation.
Awesome. And thanks everybody for tuning in. Please like and subscribe to it, whatever you do on social media, to share this around with your friends. And until next time, you stay healthy, world.